consciousness itself is fairly neutral. It doesn't judge good or bad. And the mind is a one level of consciousness. But if you focus your consciousness on your heart, everything that you will do will be good for you and be good for the world and be good for the planet and be good for everything on the planet. So I like to work with people that are committed to opening up their heart and expanding their consciousness through their heart more than anything else.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so glad that you're with us today. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott, and today we've got a wonderful guest, Lynnda Pollio, and she's a consciousness doula. And I can't wait to get into what a consciousness doula really is. But she's also a frequency artist, and as well as an author of multi-award-winning, best-selling inspirational novel called Trusting the Currents, which we'll have to get into as well. Now, as a consciousness doula, she helps people understand and really connect to the energetic frequencies that are all around us, because remember, everything is energy. And she helps people understand what those are, as well as expand their own self-awareness so that they can transform and then help the world transform. And ultimately, Lynnda's somebody who believes that, we're all in the process of becoming something more than we are, and more than we feel, more than we really, it's really something unexpected. And so all the answers that we are searching for literally lie in our heart. So with that, Lynnda, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Oh, this is going to be great. Now, one of the things that I first have to ask is, what is a consciousness doula? I can't even say that.
I know. It's a tough word.
It's a tough word. What is a consciousness doula?
Well, I mean, I kind of created the term because I've been on the road to consciousness my entire life, and I had been the world's first chief consciousness officer for a global marketing consultancy a long time ago. And that was a position that I had created within that company. But when I decided to leave the corporate world, I am totally committed to being of service to consciousness. And I wanted to be able to find a way to bring some of the knowledge and the wisdom that I had been experiencing throughout my life to other people. And doulas, as most people will know, are mostly about birthing. They're about birthing babies. Doulas have been around forever, and they help birth babies. And recently, there's been the advent of the death doula. And this is someone who helps people and their families kind of guide through the process of death, both from a physical perspective and a spiritual perspective, and also emotionally. So it's all about birthing someone to the other side, which you know a lot about.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to help people birth consciousness. I believe that unless we really understand our own consciousness and learn to elevate and expand it, we can't really change the world or our lives in any meaningful way, because it's through our level of consciousness that we actually move into new directions. So that's why I just called myself a consciousness doula. I also believe that we have to have language for something to actually exist. And I've always kind of put the flags down for different terminology, because I want consciousness to be a really common word, and also the birthing of consciousness to be something that is normalized.
Interesting. Now, you're that successful consciousness doula, but you're living out in Sedona, Arizona, which is the peak of energy. I love Sedona. But what fascinates me is that you used to be a New York advertising executive,
yes,
which is totally phenomenal, fantastic. My dad used to be in the ad agencies back in the 50s and 60s. So how did you go from being in the ad world to now being in the spiritual consciousness world. Those are very different sides.
Well, it was very different, but it was interesting because, I have always had a connection to an expanded state of consciousness my whole life. So I don't look at what I do now as something I evolved into. I look at advertising being something I moved through to get where I am now, but I had always kind of been there. So as a child, I was just the odd one out. I was having experiences with bugs and nature and beings, and I was very creative as a child. I mean, the first two things I wanted to be when I was 5 was a nun and an artist. And I was kind of pushed away from both of them. The nun I kind of got rid of pretty quick myself.
Yeah.
But the artist was kind of taken away from me because as a child, my parents were more interested in me going to school and getting good grades and didn't really understand the creative spirit. So I was always that way. And in my 20s, I sort of stumbled around from industry to industry. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Nothing really felt like me. There was no consciousness at that point. There were no consciousness doulas. There were no consciousness coaches. People didn't know what the word was. So I just sort of stumbled around as best I could. And then in my early 30s, I found advertising, and advertising at least was creative for me, particularly at that point in time. It was a very creative space, and it allowed a lot of leeway. I could come into the office when I wanted and leave what I wanted, as long as I was doing well, which I went into, not into the creative side, actually. I went into the new business side. So I ended up helping advertising agencies build their new business programs. I went in as just a startup person, and then within 2.5 years, I was an executive vice president of business development. And then from there, I started my own consultancy, and I worked with a lot of agencies, helping them sort of analyze and build new business programs. And the reason that I was so successful in that was not that I was so brilliant or that I understood these businesses so well, but because of my level of consciousness and my ability to connect with people and understand and kind of, see where they're going and see where they're trying to get to. I just became very successful. So I did that for many years, and I loved advertising at the time, and it paid the bills, and it brought me into a state of working with all different kinds of people and all different kinds of personalities, which I like. I'm a Gemini rising, so I'm very about different people.
I'm a Gemini too.
Are you? I'm a Cancer, but I have Gemini rising, and my moon's in Pisces. So I was always very intuitive and very sensitive. And so how I kind of moved into the whole consciousness world was, I took care of my father for a year before he died. And 3 days after he died, I heard a voice say, "Go to Sedona." And I had heard of Sedona, but I had never been here before. So I was a very spontaneous person, particularly when I was younger. So I got on a plane about 2 weeks later. I had nowhere to stay, didn't know why I was going. I drove into Sedona, and I literally felt the canyon say, "Welcome home." And I ended up staying for 5 months. And in those 5 months, I had all kinds of spiritual awakenings that were really reawakenings from my childhood. I was having flashbacks of things that I experienced when I was a child that I had pushed aside. And so after those 5 months, I went on raw foods. I changed everything about my life. I was here with people I didn't know. I was in an environment I'd never been to before. I started eating differently. So it was kind of like, I was like an onion, and the layers of my old social conditioning began to peel away until finally, after 5 months, I felt what I call my inner resonant signature, which is that one frequency that is you alone. And that when you feel it, you know that that's who you are. And no matter what else you are experiencing through other people's perception of you, you then know who you are, and you can start moving forward in a new direction based on that. So once I felt that, I knew I had to go back to New York City. I was getting a lot of problems from people thinking that I had lost my mind. So I decided to go back to New York, and I get back and I realized I could not go back into advertising in the same way that I had been there before. I needed to get involved with companies that were more conscious, that were doing good things for the planet, that had a commitment to service to others. And that was kind of the advent of organizations like LOHAS, which was Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, and Conscious Capitalism, and all these kind of corporate businesses that were just beginning to look at consciousness in a different way, and actually engage that word. So I became sort of a consciousness consultant, and I worked with a lot of small companies like startups that were doing solar energy and organics, and it was the advent of all these. And so I did a lot of marketing and branding and communication for these companies, and just worked with these amazing spirits that were committed to really bringing a new level of awareness and consciousness through food and energy and finances and everything. And I did that for a bunch of years. And then I ended up taking care of my mother for a couple of years after she had a stroke. I've been led around a lot by caregiving. I'm a caregiver by nature, and it finds its way to me. So my mother had a stroke. I took care of her for a couple of years. I couldn't really work that much during those couple of years. So at the end of that, I needed to go back to a job, and I hadn't had an actual job in about 15 years. I had been a consultant. So it was kind of a shock, but I knew that I needed to be able to work with three things: my past experience in business development and corporations. Second was my awareness of consciousness. And then for the first time, I talked about my ability to work with energy. And I'm an energy worker, and I've done a lot of energy healing. I've studied all the different healing modalities, energetic healing modalities. I'm very frequency adept. So I ended up going to work with a futurist who had a corporate marketing consultancy, and she hired me to do new business. But after I got there, I kind of pitched her the idea of becoming the first chief consciousness officer. I had been trying to get an ad agency for about 10 years to build that position, because my thinking was, just as when digital technologies came in, and it was kind of a weird bunch of people talking about all this new world that was coming. And when they finally started coming, corporations had to hire a chief technology officer. So they had to create a whole new position for these new technologies to be brought into the world. And my thinking was, now we had human technologies, wisdom, intuition, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and gratitude, that I thought would become very important in the future. And they needed someone, a chief consciousness officer, to understand those technologies. They're more human, soft technologies. So I tried for 10 years to get an agency to hire me, and I got close a couple of times, but no cigar. So finally, I got this futurist who had the vision to say yes, and I became the world's first chief consciousness officer. And I ended up working with the CEOs and CMOs of Fortune 100 companies, bringing them different ideas of how to work with these new human technologies that were coming in. And then I left to start my own consultancy, and my mother got sick again, and I went into caregiving, and that became a whole nother story. And when I came out of that, that is when the idea of being a consciousness doula kind of came to me, because I had gone through a really deep dark night of the soul, and I had, because of it, had, I think, gained a lot of wisdom, and I was really ready and to really help people in a different way than I'd helped before. And I just kind of went into I'm just going straight into helping people and no longer working with companies. And that's kind of a fairly recent incarnation of me.
Okay. Well, that's phenomenal. It sounds like you really been through that long journey, that long valley, that, to get from where you were to where you are.
It's been a long journey.
And it always is, and believe me, it'll probably it'll never stop. It'll
I know.
But it's so interesting, because so many people kind of are starting to toss around this concept of consciousness. Hey, are you aware of your consciousness? And what do you see as a definition for consciousness? What is consciousness? Why is it important? Why do we need to be aware of it? What do we need to understand about it, and all that?
Well, I mean, for me, consciousness in its simplest form is awareness. When you're conscious of something, you're aware. And whether you're aware of, something personal and intimate, aware your feelings about someone that you're with, or whether you're aware on a more global level, it's simply awareness. And I think we live in consciousness. I think the whole world, whatever God is, whatever the universe is consciousness itself. Now, this is my belief system because we actually don't know anything. we only have belief systems. And I like to say that, consciousness is this neutral field that we can pull all kinds of information and knowledge and wisdom out of. And we create reality nests within that field. And those reality nests are built through our belief systems. So someone creates a belief system here, which is truth, because once you create a belief system and you get enough people believing the same thing, it becomes a truth. But then someone else can build another belief system over here, and that begins another reality nest. And I think some of our conflicts right now is that we're building separate reality nests, and they're all right and they're all wrong. And instead of people saying, let me just expand my consciousness to look at this other reality nest, they're just focusing on their own reality nest and thinking that that's the only thing there is. In my book, I write about, there's a story that a teacher tells the main character, Addie Mae, and she said, it's like living in a house, and this house is full of all these crystal windows, and out one window is an ocean, and out another window is a forest, and another window is a scary dark road. And living your life without looking out other windows is fine, but why wouldn't you want to see the other views that you can have? Because they're all part of your existence.
Right.
So for me, consciousness is both unexplainable, and we can narrow it down. And that's why for me, consciousness has to come through the heart, because consciousness itself is fairly neutral. It doesn't judge good or bad. And the mind is a one level of consciousness. But if you focus your consciousness on your heart, everything that you will do will be good for you and be good for the world and be good for the planet and be good for everything on the planet. So I like to work with people that are committed to opening up their heart and expanding their consciousness through their heart more than anything else.
Yeah. And that's actually the way spirit works with us. Spirit works through our heart. So as we're connecting with spirit, they're actually going through our heart. That's the primary, connector. They'll be connecting with our aura, but they'll be going through our heart. And that's where the energy is. Some people say the consciousness is in the mind. Some say it's in the solar plexus. But if you really look at where it's located, it's ultimately, through the heart. And that's really where you understand where this vibration comes from, where that energy ultimately is. So everybody says, well, consciousness is just the energy of the brain, and we don't know where it's located. And scientists say, well, we can't find it yet. Well, you're never going to find it because it's all throughout you. You are a consciousness. It's like saying, where is God? Well, God's inside you. It's in the leaf outside. It's just energy. And
Exactly.
it's like the Greek. The Greek gods were saying, where can we place this knowledge where humans will never find it? I know. Let's put it in the heart. They'll never find it there.
I know. People get terrified of their heart, because that's a lot of time. People have had their heart broken, and there's a lot of trauma. And so to get into your heart, you have to start letting some of the little bugaboos out that are in there, and that can be very scary for people. So, I mean, it's, when you look at all the heroes' journeys and all the stories, there's always a trial that someone has to go through. And that's the trial of getting through the heart, to opening the heart up so that you let those traumas out, and you then have this expansiveness in the way that you look at the world. And it's a never, for me, as far as I can tell, in my experience, I don't think we ever get there in this life. I think we just run out of time, and you can stop anytime you want. I don't think, this is a world where everyone has to be at the same level of consciousness. I think we just all have to respect where each other's are and what we're bringing to the puzzle that is our existence.
Yeah. And I think you brought up an interesting topic, the whole concept of, the dark night of the soul, the shadow work that we all need to do, because as we go through life, we just keep on building more and more either pain or memories or things that we are just kind of burying, beneath the surface so that we don't have to deal with them. And our ego mind does a great job of doing that. Our ego mind is designed to protect us. So what does it do? It just says, I'm not going to let you deal with it right now. I'm going to put it away so that you're protected, because I don't want you feeling any pain, because that's my job. I am your defender. And it does a great job. So we just keep on piling stuff, garbage, layers and layers of garbage. And so the more you let it pile up, the more work you got to do. So, when you really kind of get there, it's like eventually you start to deal with it and you unpack it. Is that the dark night of the soul? And we finally start going through that garbage and wading through it and exposing it to the bright light of the sun. And we're like, I can't deal.
Yeah, people don't want to look at themselves. And if we don't look at it, if we don't really work on that, though, that trauma, that darkness becomes a toxin that we spit at other people. And so, we think it's about them, but we are taking that because it has to come out of us in some way. It has to come out. So we pick a person, a idea, whatever, and we throw those toxins at that idea or that person because we need to get it out. And if we would just find kind of kinder ways to allow it to come out more gently, we wouldn't have to. And that's what community is all about too, to be able to be in community with people where you're able to bring those toxins out and you are kept protected, and not judged for it. Because we have a lot of judgment and shame in our world right now.
Oh,
so it's hard to let those things out.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, if you go back to archaic role models where, for example, men are not allowed to cry, so they're not allowed to deal with pain, suffering, emotions, and go through that dark night of the soul where they're revealing and dealing with all that garbage that's way down, packed down inside. They're not, we men are not allowed to kind of expose that. It's just socially unacceptable. It's the way, there's men are saying, oh, men don't cry.
Right.
Well, why? What's the point? We're supposed to be that tough? I don't get it.
Well, maybe that's why they're so angry.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Because they can't get the toxins out in a healthy way. And we're all programmed. I mean, we're just these little programmed, energetic, we're full of patterns. We're full of our personal patterns, our family patterns, our ancestral patterns, our religious patterns, our societal patterns. And we don't realize how programmed we are. But knowing that we're programmed and knowing that everything can be reprogrammed, that's what the power of consciousness is, to allow people to learn how to reprogram themselves. And the reprogramming will always feel unfamiliar and uncomfortable, because even if you're miserable, your misery is comfortable. So it's
something you can hold on to.
It's something you can trust it.
Yes,
you can trust that
in
misery.
That area. What's it? I'm in my comfort zone. I don't have to step outside of my comfort zone. As soon as I am trying to grow, by definition, I'm no longer in my comfort zone. So growth is very uncomfortable.
Exactly. Well, growth is always uncomfortable. Look at anything. Look at a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis. Look at a sprout coming out of the ground. Look at a baby being born. I mean, birth is an uncomfortable process. But, once you realize, and even, when I'm working with my art, it's very uncomfortable because I never know what I'm doing. I always think this is going to be stupid. Why am I doing this? Why am I wasting my time? It's always that way. But once you realize that's part of the process, then you learn to allow yourself and you pay attention to it, and you can journal it. You can write it down. There's all different ways of learning from that discomfort so that it makes it easier as you go forward, but also at the end of it, you'll have something beautiful to show. I mean, birth always has something beautiful at the end of it.
Yeah. And it kind of going back to the whole archaic stereotypes of, for example, guys not supposed to be, allowed to cry. It's the whole feeling of, you're not allowed to show weakness, and crying is a demonstration of weakness or something.
Yeah.
And so you're revealing that you're upset, sad, weak about something. So
And who made that rule? Like, who made that rule?
Who knows?
Why would that be true?
I don't know.
You're a human being. Men are human beings, so they're going to have the same emotions that women have.
Right.
That's the programming.
That's the programming that goes back hundreds of thousands of years.
Yes.
But before there was language, where if you were seen as weak, you were then thrown out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that tribal mentality that goes way back.
Well, survival.
And so yeah, exactly. It's survival.
Yeah.
So if you're a guy and if you're a male in that tribe and you're seen as weak, you're not allowed in that tribe anymore. And
right.
So that's basically what we're dealing with even now, because there still is a tribe. It's just a social tribe,
mm-hmm.
whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You're still in a tribe of some kind. And
it's also in our cellular memory. These are ancestral cellular memories. So, but the whole idea of consciousness is, we have javelina here. They're these wild, they look like pigs, but they're just giant rodents. And they're all instinctual. And they do what they want to do because it's out of instinct. So the whole idea of being human is that you're not just run by your instincts, that you have the consciousness to override your instincts when they're negative to yourself or to others. But I don't think people have that awareness as much as they should, that they don't have to accept their instincts, that they do have a consciousness that can override that. And then when you override your consciousness, you can start training it to think something else. I have this patterning thing that I do. I call it the cupcake theory. And you're having a bad day and you decide, and you're walking down the street. I lived in New York City, so I could see myself walking down the street, and I run and I see a bakery, and there are delicious looking cupcakes in the window. And I'm having a bad day, and I'm looking at the cupcake going, that cupcake looks really good, and it's going to make me feel better. But I know it's not good for me. I don't do gluten. It's not good for me. I shouldn't be eating it, sugar. And so I'm at a point, and I could either walk away feeling a little bit of tinge going, oof, that cupcake would have been good. Or I can go in and have the cupcake. So let's say I go in and have the cupcake. I eat the cupcake and I'm right. It feels amazing. I feel so much better. It tastes delicious. It comforts me. I walk out of the cupcake store happy I had the cupcake. I walk around another week later and I'm walking by it again. And this time I feel fine, but the cupcake's back in the window. And I'm now having the memory of how wonderful that cupcake tasted. And again, I could say, I'm going to walk away. This time I go, okay, I'm going to have another cupcake. So I go and have the cupcake. It was good, but didn't do the same thing for me. So every time now I walk, that cupcake becomes, I get used to going to the cupcake store. Even if I don't want the cupcake, I'm eating the cupcake and then I'm feeling guilty about it. Whereas if I had just walked away, eventually I wouldn't even see the bakery. Because you've trained your mind in a different way. And we can do that with everything. And it's not easy. I don't think anyone would say it's easy, but it's possible. And particularly with help, with guidance, whether you're doing coaching with someone or whether it's part of a community, or it's a practice you make, you can always reprogram yourself to more, to be healthier.
Interesting. We were just talking about, community a second ago, where we're talking about, the tribe and social effects and all that. So what do you think the impact of a tribe or a community has on the whole awakening phenomenon, the whole awakening experience? Do you get a sense that there's an influence of either one person impacting the community or the community actually having an effect on that person who's having the awakening experience? Which way does it go?
Well, I think you can't wake anyone up. I think that's an internal job. I think if you wake up, it's just your moment. And sometimes you have just spontaneous awakenings, and people are having these where all of a sudden they're not looking at their lives the same and they're going, why am I doing this? And I'm looking at the people in my life going, they're really not nice people. Why am I with them? So they're having these spontaneous awakenings, and that's happening for a bunch of reasons. But there's also through trauma and through struggle and suffering. Suffering is the great awakener. Usually if you go through some kind of really difficult situation, that is the moment where you will be able to break through your programming to see that maybe there's a different way of living.
That's the catalyst that really changes things.
It's definitely the catalyst. It's probably the most common catalyst.
Yeah.
But once you wake up, you're kind of standing. Let's say you're outside the cave now. You've been living in a cave, and everyone is in the cave, and everyone thinks that's all there is. And all of a sudden, you walk out of the cave and you see the light, and you're like, "Whoa! I didn't see this light before. Oh my God, what are these people doing back there? Don't they know there's all this life out there?" But when you're standing there, all of a sudden you see your shadow, and that reminds you that you're alone. So what community does is allow you to be in the light and stay in the light long enough to kind of get your sea legs and get comfortable in that light and learn about what awakening is. And I'm a big believer in, awakening programs and reading books that help you awaken and anything, because it's really hard in the beginning because you'll probably be alone, and the awakening process has a time period where you're going to feel solitude and loneliness, and a sense of being the freak in the room. But that seems to,
maybe also a little sense of loss, because all of a sudden you're no longer where you used to be.
Exactly. And you don't know what's going on. And I've met a lot of people that are having awakenings that don't know what's happening. And when I will voice it to them, because languaging is really important when you're waking up, because your words carry frequencies as you transmit. So when you're speaking to someone about them having an awakening and you're using languaging that they haven't heard before, and it's resonating with them about their experience, they get very emotional because they didn't know that they were having an awakening. So it's really great to be able to, give them as many tools as possible. And community is great because the tools are not there all the time, but you can have the 1 or 2 or 3 people around you that you can call when you think you're going crazy because you're having an experience that you can't talk to with your family about. And all these communities that you build, and most of them are like small, I call them like pods. It'd be like pods of people that are your pod of your frequency. And because you're going to be relating to people in your frequency. And all these frequencies have different belief systems, and none of them are wrong. They're all just different. So what'll happen is these little pods, if you keep your mind open, will start connecting, and that will begin to create a bigger level of consciousness in the world, because we're not uniquely weird. We're all weird in our own way. And what we do is we try to make our weirdness the best way, particularly when you're waking up. You want to believe in something, so you will tend to think that what you're thinking and doing is right, and that person over there is not right. But consciousness and awakening it's sort of like Russian dolls. Like you're in a Russian doll, and then all of a sudden, you have an awakening, and you realize that Russian doll is bigger now, and you have to fill up that doll with experiences and awarenesses, and then just as you think you got it all figured out, boom, you're in the next Russian doll. And that's sort of the fun part of, I think, consciousness of someone who really makes a commitment to consciousness. It's a total opening of different levels of awarenesses, and whether that is just personal about yourself, about what's going on in the world, which is a whole nother story. Cosmic consciousness, earth consciousness, it's all kind of there for you to play with and to learn from.
Wow. Yeah, that's so well said. And, when you're talking about the concept of an awakening, creating your own little pod, or feeling like you're like, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Exactly.
Where are we? What do we do? That very much, resonates with me. And that was exactly what was going through me when I had my sort of, call it a reawakening, where I was like, oh my God. There are only two people that I can either, have that sensation where I'm hearing voices. There are only two kind of people that can hear voices. They're either in the Hindu Kush and they're spiritual gurus, or they're crazy. Well, I'm no spiritual guru up in the Hindu Kush. Oh my God, I'm crazy.
I know, it's true. And that's why it's important to normalize this. Yeah. And it's beginning a little bit now because there's more people. Everything's on Instagram and TikTok and I'm sorry, there's all kinds of things like that. But it's important that you have people around you that will, even if you are crazy, will allow your craziness to develop and see where it goes. And as long as you're in your heart and you're not in judgment and you're not in shame, it's a really exciting journey.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. So, once you get to that point, this is a catalyst itself that drives people to find new community, new pods, because that was exactly what happened to me. I'm like, oh God, I got to understand what this is. I think I know where it's going. I think I know what's happening, but I've never been here before. I need people who can tell me what's going on. So I then went in search of, all the spiritualist churches, the mediumship groups, the guides, the teachers, and I just surrounded myself suddenly by all these people that I never knew before, but at least they were, saying, oh yeah, welcome to the club. This is what happens. They
understood you. Yes, they understand you.
And I was like, oh, wow, you mean, so this is real? So this has actually happened to all you? And they're all like, oh yeah, you're just beginning. I was like, what?
Yeah, that's exactly important. Yep.
Yeah, and your whole concept of the person stepping out of the cave when they begin to become aware of a new reality is the perfect summary of Plato's allegory of the cave.
Exactly.
Because we're like those prisoners chained against the wall, living their whole life in the cave, and that's all they know. And then suddenly one prisoner gets free, goes out the cave door, sees, oh, wow, there's actually bright light and nature and animals and other things outside, and rushes back to the prisoners in the cave, says, hey, guys, guess what? There's actually nature and light and other things out there. And then they're all like, no, you're crazy. There's nothing beyond this cave. That's all we know.
And that's happening now. And the thing is, when you go out the cave, not only do you see the world differently, but you begin to become someone different.
Yeah. Exactly.
That begins a journey into an aspect of you. I mean, even
maybe you get a sunburn.
Well, I think we do get sunburned. I mean, that's part of the awakening suffering part, because you definitely get burned. And I think the sunburn, I would talk about, like, a lot of people, when they start on the journey, they'll have these mystical experiences. Mm-hmm. And you can glamorize them, because you'll usually have some mystical experience and then you think that's the way life's going to be. And that's the sunburn. You get this, wow, that's amazing, but they don't last. And even when you have them, within a few minutes even, they begin to vanish in your mental capacity to trust that they happened. And they don't happen very often. I mean, you may go through a short period of time. I know when I was having my reawakening, I had a lot of mystical experiences, and it's very easy to believe when you're having those mystical experiences, but then they fade away, and then you're on your own. And then you have to take the steps by yourself, and hopefully there are other people there and there are tools there so that you keep going. But I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a never-ending journey.
Yeah, it definitely is. I know that, for example, one of my idols within mediumship was Mavis Patilla, famous medium. She was practicing mediumship easily for 50 plus years, and her story is amazing. But she always said that you're never going to stop learning. You will never end.
Exactly.
You will always keep learning new quivers, new arrows to put in your quiver. And, she says, even now at my ripe old age of 80, whatever it was at the time, I remember her saying it, I'm learning new things. I'm learning new, aspects of mediumships that I never knew, decades ago. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh my God, wait a second. You're one of the oldest and most well-respected, most well-practiced mediums to ever live. And you're still telling us you're still learning. Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, where am I and who am I?
I mean, consciousness doesn't give you answers. It gives you more questions.
No. Yes, it does.
It tends to give you more I mean, you may get answers to things that are kind of in the mind, but it opens up questions in a profound way. And those questions don't end. You just get more of them. The deeper you go, the more questions you have. And, you really begin to, skirt the vortexes of the universe a little bit.
Yeah, right. Now, what's so interesting is that so many people, and I think yourself included, have spoken about both light and frequencies in language and in art and in music. So, how do you find that people are tapping into these frequencies? They're tapping into all the different vibrations and light codes, they call it, in music, in art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of people now. I mean, light language, I actually don't say this to many people, but when I took care of my mother for 9 years. It was a very deep, dark night of the soul. It was very, very difficult. And about 5 years into it, I started waking up in the middle of the night speaking in tongue. Like I would just be speaking in a language, and it freaked me out because I was in a very dark place, and I thought maybe I had an entity attachment. I got afraid. So I kept suppressing it, even though when I allowed it to speak, it was very comforting. And I must have been doing this by myself without telling a soul for 5 or 6 years. And it was and I just allow it. It usually would happen in the middle of the night, but then sometimes when I'm driving, until one day somehow on Google, I heard the term light language because I saw someone speaking it and I was like, that kind of sounds like me. Now, I don't do it in any way except for myself. So the languaging, I've always been very sensitive to languaging, even when I was in the corporate world. I mean, the way you can have an idea and you can language it 5 different ways for 5 different audiences, because everyone needs to digest those frequencies that come with those words in different ways, depending on where they are. So the light language, I was not going to be public about because even me, I think it's weird. So I wanted to keep it kind of quiet. But then when I had done art when I was a child, but I had shattered my elbow in April of this past year's hiking, and I broke it in 2 places. I have a plate and 10 screws in. And I had never had surgery before. I had never had a break before. It was not fun. And it was my left hand, and I'm left-handed.
Oh, God.
So as it started healing, I started feeling this desire to do art as I did as a kid. So I started with this channeled information that comes through me, and it became art. And so I'm finding that the language that was coming through me is now going from language into visual art. So I am now creating light language art, and I've been doing this only since probably the end of May, and I'm just finishing my 21st piece. It's just, I'm in a creative fever right now, but I have channeled probably my whole life. I usually would call it just high knowledge. Like I never would hear a voice. The only time I heard a voice was when I channeled my book, Trusting the Currents. I started hearing the voice of an old Black Southern woman one day when I was working on a project, when I was doing conscious consulting. And she just said, it's not what happened to me that matters. That was her first word to me, and it totally freaked me out. I had never heard a voice before, because you probably hear voices way more. I had never heard a voice. I would get information, downloads, but the voices, I didn't get voices. So that was the first voice I got, and it kind of spooked me. I wrote down what she said, and she kept speaking, and I wrote probably 3 or 4 paragraphs, and that ended up becoming the beginning of the book. And then she would come back, and I would feel her presence every time she came. And I'll keep this short because it's a very long story, but over a 2-year period, I channeled the book, and it came out in very heavy Southern Black dialect. And I wrote some of it in New York, and then she told me to come back to Sedona. So I wrote the last 9 months of the channeling was here. And I came back and I had never channeled that way before. It was very intense for me. I got a little crazy. So I went back to New York. I had to go back to work. I had to go back to the real world, and I put the book away for a year. I never expected to publish it. And I had to it took me several months to kind of decompress from the energies of having her present in my life. And then a year later, she came back and said, okay, it's time. It took me 8 years to edit it because of the way I work with frequencies in the book. And I've never heard her again. I feel her every once in a while, but the book came out, and it's a long story too, but it's won a bunch of awards, and it's been a really interesting journey. So the channeling, working with frequencies, has been a big part of my life in many ways, and it still is.
It's so interesting. You were touching on art, and as part of an awakening, or as part of an energy, or as part of a frequency, you're channeling the frequencies into art. And suddenly it dawned on me, there are a lot of people who have near-death experiences who come back, and for some reason, unbeknownst to them, they just start painting these beautiful pictures. So there's something about for the frequency that they undergo, and they're suddenly leveled up countless levels of energy, and they suddenly start to channel all this energy and all these frequencies, and it's going into their painting. And so they're just creating all these amazing paintings where before they couldn't paint to save their life.
It's like light codes. It's like light codes. It's light codes coming in. And I always tell people, I haven't been really doing much with my art yet, but I will. It's beginning to form into something. But each of my pieces is a life lesson. Like, I get a life lesson with every piece, and I never know what the name of it is until usually a week or two after I create it. Then it tells me its name, and then I get the information about what life lesson this is. And if you stare and look at my pieces, and you meditate on them, that's when the life lesson comes through. So it's been really interesting because this is all new, and I'm an elder now. So this came late in my life to have this kind of experience. But and I think anyone who is having awakening experiences, like this piece right here, I'm going to show you this one. This is called The Awakening. And this is all about just the visual experience of having an awakening and what happens, visually to you when you're having the experience. Wow. So, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was called The Awakening until after I finished creating it. And I think anyone who's having an awakening or in the process of expanding their consciousness, if they could find some creative outlet, whether it is writing, whether it is art, whether it is dance, whether it is performance art of some sort, I think it's a wonderful way of allowing those frequencies to run through your body. It's like allowing them to run through a piece of machinery.
Yeah.
It just churns it out, and it becomes something. And whether or not anyone ever looks at it, or whether anyone reads your writing or looks at your art or watches you dance, that's not as important as you allowing it to come through you, because you're opening up the channels in a way and letting these energies know that you are an open channel for these positive energies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and that goes right to the heart of one of the most famous phrases, for example, in mediumship, is always trust and surrender.
Yeah.
And by that just means allow.
Yeah.
Allow that allow everything to happen as it is. Surrender yourself to what's coming in. Trust that it's for the highest good. Trust that what you're getting is accurate. So you trust and you surrender and you're allowing. And as a result, you're opening your channels and you're just letting whatever you're receiving, come through you. So that's amazing.
And trust is the big word. I think in all of the work we're doing, and the work that you're doing, and the work that I'm doing, and in any kind of consciousness raising, awakening process, trust is the big word, because we don't trust. And we don't trust ourselves mostly because we were taught not to trust ourselves.
Right.
So we have to learn to trust. That's why my book is called Trusting the Currents, because, and it was really for me because I also need to be trusted. I also need to know my trust, to trust.
Yeah.
So it's, so I think trust is a big word for people that are going through this process.
Yeah, exactly. Now you were talking about the inner vibration, the inner, I think you even mentioned the inner resonance. So what is an inner resonance signature? Is that just basically your vibration state, or is it something different? And how do you even activate something like that?
Well, I mean, I think it's called, I didn't make this. This has always been there. I just use that as my name, as the word that I use, because that's the phrase I got for it. And your inner resonance signature is basically your soul code. It's that one frequency that is you alone. Like we are individuals here. And yes, we will believe different things and all these experiences, but we are individuals. And so your inner resonance signature is that frequency that you're born with, that is you alone, that you feel like you. And, most people don't even know who they are because they've been, their programming, their societal conditioning has been so thorough that they're not connected in with that. So, but once you can get to that, and awakening helps you get through that, and different classes and courses and books, and there are ways of getting there. But you have to surrender and trust to get there. And then once you get there, once you feel that and you go, that's who I am. And that's what I got to the first time I came to Sedona, is I had been, I was like all these other people's thoughts. I was my job, and I was in a relationship, and I was a daughter, and I was this and I was that. But being the little bit freak that I was, that inner frequency had been kind of shut down because I wanted to be accepted and I wanted to be loved. So when I came to Sedona and I started having all these experiences, and that layer of the onion disappeared, and all of a sudden I felt like me, and it was okay to be different. And it was okay not to think what everyone else thought. That was the real awakening for me. And then everything after that was building that to be strong enough so that it could sustain itself when the programming comes in again. And I'm not saying that I've been perfect with it. I mean, it's very hard to keep that inner resonance signature clean, but once you feel it, you always can find it again. You can always go back to it. So that's, that's I'm very committed to helping people find that one thing that's them, because it changes you completely once you feel that.
Yeah. I think it's like once the cat is out of the bag, you can't put it back in. That's one way of saying it. Or once you've discovered what your vibration is, you've suddenly had that shift in vibration. It's not like you can go backwards and unshift it. It's once it's out, once it's done.
No, and that's something that someone has to understand who's going through an awakening. Is there's no going back. Because it does scare people, and because you become isolated very often from others around you, and you don't want what you used to want. People go, oh, it's kind of like the Matrix, the movie Matrix, and the end of it, the one guy goes, I just want to go back. I want to be wealthy. I want to eat good food. I don't want to know anything. So
exactly.
You kind of want to go back, but you can't go back. So you have to keep going forward.
It's like the analogy that's coming to me suddenly is like saying, okay, you're a caterpillar. You've always been comfortable as a caterpillar. And then suddenly you're this beautiful butterfly. Well, guess what? You can't go back to being a caterpillar, even though it was really fun just crawling along the ground.
Yeah, and you thought it was safe.
Gorgeous, it was really safe there. And you had your thing. You knew where it is. Now you're this gorgeous butterfly that can fly everywhere and do everything, and it looks absolutely beautiful. You can't go backwards.
Nope.
You can only go forwards now.
Nope.
So that, I think that's kind of the way to think about it. And that kind of goes to the whole concept of, we're all learning. We're all on our journey of learning. We're all trying to understand, the information that we're being given, or that's being downloaded, or that we're experiencing on our everyday life. So, what do you sort of see as that role of learning, the role of experience, the role of wisdom that's coming down from wherever it is, on a person's life? How does a person begin to grapple with the additional information that they before weren't really experiencing? All of a sudden now they're like, what do I do with all this?
Yeah, that's a big question, because it does change who you are. And I think that's where community can really help you, or that's where you need to have someone who can bounce off you. You need the mirror to be able to talk to, so that you're not just talking to yourself in your head. And you need someone who is, trusts you and cares about you, and allows, with no judgment, allows you to kind of break through your own belief systems a little bit, because we can't break through our own belief systems if we surround ourselves with people that don't allow us to do that. And what happens is, when you start breaking through your belief system into another world, the people around you go, ew, I don't want to go there. So if I don't want to go there, I can't let you go there either. Right. So they will try to shut you down in some way, shape, or form. So that's why it's important. And other things can do this too. Books can help you. I mean, that's why so many of these spiritual books are really important to read, because it's really about finding the resonance outside of you that you're feeling inside. And that's when I end up talking to people, and I always, for some reason, end up talking to people who are having awakenings, and it's just I'm in a store somewhere and I have a conversation with them, and I could see that they're having an experience, and I will talk to them, and then all of a sudden they'll start crying, because I'm voicing what they feel for the first time. So it's important, as this information comes in, that you find external ways of allowing the internal voice to be reflected externally. And that can be through courses you take, through teachers you find, through communities you join, or through a friend who's having a similar experience. It doesn't have to be anyone that you pay for even. It's really important to just find people that you can trust, because you need that external validation so that you don't think you're going crazy.
And I think that's also another thing to keep in mind, is that you talked about somebody going through an experience, their vibration shifting, versus maybe a friend who's not going through the experience, they're not shifting, they're at their old vibration. And people wonder, well, am I going to be able to keep my friends? Am I going to be able to keep my old community? Sometimes you're not going to be able to.
Sometimes you can't, and the thing is too, there's no right and wrong. If it doesn't mean that you're evolving beyond them and you're a better person and you're more conscious. And we tend, and I was guilty of this when I first had my kind of reawakening, is I felt a little evangelical. I felt like I had learned something that everyone should know. Right. And that everyone should be lucky to have experienced what I've experienced. Well, that's not true. And not everyone is meant to have these experiences in this life. And it's perfectly fine to be a normal person without having these expanded levels of consciousness, and live a wonderful, beautiful life with as long as you're in your heart. I mean, for me, it's all, are you in your heart or not? If you're a good person, you don't have to believe anything beyond what this world is showing you. But if you are one of these people that are waking up, then you just need to be able to do it and not and allow other people where they are. And I think as you go along that path, that journey, you really learn to allow people where they are, and you begin to stay in a place of neutrality, where you're Switzerland, you're consciousness Switzerland. And whether someone is a terrible person or a wonderful person, you hold the same frequency of yourself with both of them. And that resonates out, even to the person who's terrible. I mean, a lot of times the people who are mean need our kindness more than anybody else. I mean, mean people are not happy. You can't have meanness and happiness in the same place.
Right.
So
There's a reason why they were mean.
exactly. So you hold that space of a higher consciousness without letting them think that there's something wrong with them for not being in the same space. Just model it and let them make their own decisions.
Yeah. Interesting. That's so interesting. God, we could just keep on going all day, but unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left.
Okay.
Last question. If you were, what one piece of advice would you give to a listener that you think or you feel that might be able to help them today?
Well, I think what is most important is to disconnect from technology.
Yes. Tell that to my son.
Yeah, because you're not going to get where you want to go if you are interested in consciousness, if you are constantly plugged into social media, to the internet. And a good antidote for that is nature. So if you would turn off things and go sit under a tree, or if you can't turn off, bring the phone with you, put it next to the tree with your back to the tree and just sit. Most people can't spend 10 minutes alone with themselves. Yeah. And so for me, the first exercise for anyone is to sit alone with yourself, with your own thoughts, and allow whatever is coming up to come up, and a lot will come up, and you will feel fear, and you will feel anger, and you will feel discomfort, but that's normal. And so if you know it's normal, you just allow it. And it's just like letting the froth come up, the negative froth come up so that you can get to the good stuff. And, when I lived in New York and there wasn't a lot of nature there, but I would always keep a bag of organic dirt under my sink in the kitchen. And whenever I would get freaked out, which was a lot, I would pull it out and I would put my hands in it and I would smell it. And it was like a Valium. It brought me to a different state.
Wow.
And so there are all these little hacks that you can do if you can't get out to under a tree, and to turn off the phone and light some incense and learn to meditate.
Or even just natural oil on the back of your hand, something like that, or have a house plant, sit next to a house plant. That's nature.
Exactly.
You're dealing with it.
And it's a journey. I mean, there's no 5 easy steps to enlightenment. There's just not.
So tough.
And the deeper you go, the deeper you go. And like I said, not everyone will go as deep as like maybe you or me are, Chris, because we've been on this journey our whole life. And some people will go deeper than we're going to go. And some people, but it doesn't matter where you are. Yeah. It's just a matter of, do you want to be there? Do you want to go deeper? Do you want to learn more about your soul and your spirit? Do you want to have all these mystical experiences? Do you want to learn more about things that other people are not learning about? Yeah. So
it's like the saying, how do you begin the journey of 1,000 miles? Take the first step.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And nothing that we learn, that we teach, that we know has not been learned and taught before. We're just this generation's version of it. And, all of us that are on this path, whether you're just stumbling into the light for the first time, or whether you feel like you've been here for so long, you just want it to be over, because that happens sometimes too. We're here in this generation, in this world, holding this space. Yeah. And then when we leave, there'll be people that come after us that are doing the same thing that we're doing, because it's a spiral. We're just going to keep going up to a certain level of consciousness. And I don't think we're going to get there in my lifetime for sure. But we'll see. We'll see how far we can get.
We'll progress.
We'll progress. Progress is good.
As they said in the cartoon Frosty the Snowman, which I remember so fondly as a child, just take one step and put in front of the other. Exactly, and that sounds simple, but that can be very hard when you're going through an awakening process, because it's like sludging through mud
at some times. But like I said, there are tools for you, and there is support for you. And there's a lot of people doing this work now. If you just look on the internet, there are a lot of them. And just make sure they're in their heart. Make sure there's no judgment of whether you're doing something right or wrong, because there's literally nothing that you can do wrong.
Yeah.
Everything is just part of the experience of learning something new.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's wonderful. Well, Lynnda, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Chris. It was great. I enjoyed talking to you.
Well, likewise. So how can people get in contact with you if they want to learn more?
Well, they could email me at Lynnda@LyndaPollio.com. It's LYNNDA @LYNNDAPOLLIO. I have a website, LyndaPollio.com, which is a website about my book. So you'll learn all about my book on that. I have another website that I've been developing, which is still kind of in the process. It's called Wisdom Keeping. That'll have some of my art on it. And that eventually will become, I really want to create, I have a course about awakening called Wisdom Keeping, which I have, but I have not been able to put it together yet. But I'm very committed that my whole life service now is about helping people that are beginning to wake up, have the tools and the resources and the sense of community and support that they need. So whether it comes through me or whether I lead them to someone like you, Chris, or someone else that I know around the world that's doing this work, that's what I'm here for. So they could find me on Wisdom Keeping, and they can find me on LyndaPollio.com, and they can reach me at Lynnda@LyndaPollio.com, and we can go from there.
That's wonderful. Well, again, Lynnda, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot
for having you.
Wait a second, I'm going to plug you in. I just lost my plug, and I'm about to go.
Oh, we
Yay!
We can't have that.
No.
But yeah, so this was absolutely a marvelous conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Good. And for all those people who are, with us, hope you enjoyed the show. And if you've got any other piece of information that you want to know about, learn about, you have other guests you'd like to hear, by all means, let us know. And
one thing, I just want to say one thing. I forgot. I have an Instagram account. So you can find me on Instagram, and that a lot of my art is on there, and that's something that I've been sort of working on. So I forget these things. Thanks.
Very important. Well, all this, all these great contacts will be in the show notes. So be sure to take a look at the show notes. And remember always to, like and subscribe. That way you'll always make sure to get the next episode that drops. So we'll see you every Wednesday, same time, same space. So until then, I will see you next time. This is Chris sending you love and light, and I can't wait to talk to you next time. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.